Good afternoon. I will call to order the January 14th meeting of the Minneapolis City Planning Commission. My name is Matt Brown. I serve as president of the commission. I'm joined today by Commissioners Schrader, Lupke, Pierce, Sweezy, Coleman, Ellison, and Rockwell. At this time, I'll ask that you silence any mobile devices and we can get started with our meeting. Our first item of business is to approve the actions from the December 3rd meeting. Commissioners, may I have a motion to approve those actions? We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. That motion carries. Next, we will organize the agenda. We'll determine which items will be considered on consent, which we will discuss, and which will be continued to another meeting. You can find hard copies of the agenda in the hallway. So starting at the top, item number 1 is a commemorative street name addition on Plymouth Avenue North. I understand maybe there are a few people to speak on that item. Is there anyone here to speak on item 1? Okay, we will discuss item 1. Item 2 is the Shear Park addition at 900 Sibley Street Northeast, 901 Water Street, 9 8th Avenue Northeast, 1 8th Avenue Northeast, and 15 8th Avenue Northeast. That is a preliminary and final plat as well as a vacation. Is anyone wishing to speak in opposition to or modify the staff recommendation on item 2? Seeing no one, we'll put that on consent. Item 3 is another vacation on Ramsey Street Northeast. That item will be continued to the February 11th meeting. So if anyone is here for that, it'll be considered on February 11th. Item 4 is the CenterPoint Energy Substation at 2406 McNair Avenue North. Several applications for a subdivision of property as well as a substation. That item will be continued to the January 28th meeting. So if anyone is here for that, we will consider it at that time. Item 5 is Taco Bell at 215 East Lake Street. Conditional use permit and site plan review for a building addition at that location. Is anyone wishing to speak in opposition to or modify the staff recommendation on that item? So we'll discuss item 5. We have someone here to speak on that. Item 6 is the USI Communications Exchange at 3651 Snelling Avenue. Conditional use permit and site plan review for a communications exchange. Is anyone wishing to speak in opposition to or modify the staff recommendation on item 6? Seeing no one, we'll put item 6 on consent. Moving along, item 7 is the Marcy Open School addition at 307 through 323 4th Street Southeast and 414 3rd Avenue Southeast. Conditional use permit and site plan review for a building addition at that location. Is anyone wishing to speak in opposition to or modify the staff recommendation on item 7? So we have one person here. We'll discuss item 7. Item 8 is at 2924, 2928, and 2932 Bryant Avenue South. Several applications for a new multifamily building at that location. We'll discuss item 8. If anyone is here for that. Item 9 is the Linden Building at 4321 and 4353 Upton Avenue South, 2720 West 44th Street. Several applications for a new commercial building at that location. Is anyone wishing to speak in opposition to or modify the staff recommendation on item 9? Anyone for item 9? Seeing no one, we'll put item 9 on consent. Item 10 is the Lydia Apartments at 1914 and 1920 LaSalle Avenue. Conditional use permit, actually several applications for an addition for a supportive housing facility. Is anyone wishing to speak in opposition to or modify the staff recommendation on item 10? Anyone here for item 10? So we do have some people. We'll discuss item 10. Item 11 is at 901 Winter Street Northeast. Several applications for a new multifamily dwelling at that location. We'll discuss item 11. And then finally, item 12 is the archive at 102 through 120 North 1st Street. Several applications for a new multifamily or mixed-use building at that location. Is anyone wishing to speak in opposition to or modify the staff recommendation on item 12? Anyone for item 12? Okay.
I'm unclear what the recommendation is compared to information.
Okay, we can discuss item 12 briefly. It might be a little while before we get to it, but we will discuss that. And that is the end of the agenda. So our agenda as amended is as follows. Items 2, 6, and 9 will be on consent. We'll discuss items 1, 5, 7, 8, 10, 11, and 12. Item 4 will be continued to January 28th. Item 3 will be continued to February 11th. May I have a motion to approve the agenda as amended? So we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
And that motion carries. Next, may I have a motion to continue item 4 to the January 28th meeting? We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
That motion carries. Next, may I have a motion to continue item 3 to the February 11th meeting?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor? And that motion carries. Next, we have one action item, that is to approve written reasons for denial for conditional use permit and site plan review applications for property at 4757 Hiawatha Avenue. That was on the December 3rd, 2018 meeting. May I have a motion to approve those written reasons for denial? We have a motion and a second. All in favor? And that motion carries. Next, we'll move on to our public hearings, and at this time, I'll open the public hearing for the items on the consent agenda. Again, that's items 2, 6, and 9. Once again, is anyone here for any of those items, 2, 6, or 9? Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing, and commissioners may have a motion to approve the items on the consent agenda. We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
And that motion carries. Let's see. Next, we'll move on to our items for discussion. Our first item for discussion is item 1, commemorative street name addition. Staff is Ms. Souther, and we can just have a very brief presentation on this one, I think.
Yes, thank you very much. Item number 1 is a request for street renaming. It's a commemorative street renaming for Plymouth Avenue between Penn Avenue North and Queen Avenue North. The Estes Funeral Home has existed for, I believe, since the 70s at the north end of that existing street segment, and was recently reconstructed at the south end, and I believe recently just opened this year. Councilmember Ellison has requested the commemorative street renaming for this portion of the street, and we have a few people who are here to speak in favor of the application today.
All right. And commissioners, any questions of staff?
Thank you very much.
Hearing none, I'll open the public hearing for this item. And anyone who would like to speak on this item can come to the microphone. Please state your name and address for the record, and keep your remarks fairly brief, and don't simply repeat things others have said.
And I have not been here in this this position here in a while. And I think last time I was here, I turned my back to the council, actually, so I won't be doing that today. My name is Jeremiah Ellison. I live at 304 Gramercy Avenue over near Glenwood. I'm the representative city council member for Ward 5, where this commemorative street will be happening. And I just wanted to say, I really want to thank you guys for considering this item. The Estises have run their business out of North Minneapolis, have been an institution of North Minneapolis for many, many decades. And I think that it's important that when you have institutional icons that you honor them, right? That you put their names up so that the people in the neighborhood can know that this space is our space just as much as anyone else's. I was kind of inspired a little bit from, primarily from Richard and April Estes, but also from Councilmember Warsami, who took some time to do some street renaming and said that, you know, this is when Somali and Oromo folks were moving into the neighborhood, some of the street renamings were a way for them to understand that this was that they were home and not just purely visitors. I think in North Minneapolis, where we have this steep history of disinvestment, I think that we need some reminders, right, to know that this is our space, that North Minneapolis is a space that has been made a place by people that have at times in the city's history been divested from or ignored in the history. And I think that by honoring the Estises and Richard Estes, we are going to be honoring our institutional icons and also being able to claim North Minneapolis for the people of North Minneapolis. So I thank you guys.
Right, thank you. And next speaker, and please state your name and address for the record.
My name is Bill English. I reside at 12800 50th Avenue in Plymouth, Minnesota. I've lived in Minneapolis for more than 55 years. So I tell people I sleep in Plymouth and I live in North Minneapolis, where I do most of my work. I'm the consulting project director for the North Job Creation Team, which is directly and indirectly responsible for bringing, in the last 4 years, over 1,000 living wage jobs and benefits to North Minneapolis. So we have a vested interest. I work out of the Robert J. Jones Urban Research and Outreach Center, which is sponsored by the University of Minnesota. About 2 years ago, I've known Mrs. Estes and the Estes family. Well, a bit of history that you need to know. The Estes family came here more than 45 years ago, but they brought a history with them. That history came from Kansas, where their family was very much associated and worked with the people who owned Hallmark. I remember meeting Rayma Estes and then other Estes, Frederick Estes and Richard, and I saw their commitment to community service and to public service. What do I mean by that? He opened a funeral home, a trained funeral director. He opened a funeral home. And I don't know if you know anything about poor communities of color. Often, people don't have insurance. In Harlem, they used to call it funeral parties to take up money to bury people. Well, we didn't have to do that in Minneapolis, because we had Richard Estes and the Estes family. They have buried so many people here for free at no charge and on minimal donations. There's too many to count. I stand here today both as a representative of the NJCT, but more importantly, as a member of New Salem Missionary Baptist Church, where my pastor, Reverend McAfee, would have been here today. But he is in at a National Baptist Executive Committee meeting in Jackson, Mississippi. And when you ask a Baptist preacher to come to a national convention and speak, they go. But he asked me to tell you that he has directly talked to Mr. Estes for over 50 times to get at least that many people buried at very discounted rates and often at almost no cost to the families. That's the contribution this gentleman and his family has made to our community. There's a tradition in our community that we often don't feel recognized. So we had, in one time, a bronze mayor of Minneapolis because we weren't recognized. I can think of many places along the avenue that could have been named for an African American. We are grateful that we finally gave credit for the former Fifth Ward alderperson, council member Van White. But it's long overdue to recognize someone else. I spoke to the former city council person. No, I got a call from Mrs. Estes and she was weeping. And she said, I just talked to Council Member Yang. And I asked him, would you consider offering a resolution to name this street for Richard after the community had raised after he passed away? And he was told, she told him, he told her, oh, I'll give him a day, but never a street. I thought that was rather arrogant for someone who had just arrived here a few years ago. That was arrogant, and it didn't represent the feelings of the community. And so I called him, and he said the same thing to me. Well, I reminded him just before the last election. He said, don't bet against me. I said, oh yeah, I'm betting against you. And so now we got a city council person who has been kind enough and recognized the history and the contribution of this family to present this matter to you. I'm proud of him, and I thank you for your work and your service to do that. But more importantly, I'm proud of this lady, Mrs. Estes, who doesn't like to speak publicly, and her agent, Mrs. Arredondo, the aunt of Chief Rondo. So you see, we have long ties in this community for people who care about this family and who care about the contributions they have made. This planning commission could do no better than to recognize the great contribution of this family by honoring him and our community, by recognizing this icon, their contributions, and letting every kid who walks up and down that street and sees Richard Estes' name know that one day I may matter as much as he did. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And is there anyone else who would like to speak on item 1?
April Estes is going to speak.
All right. And please state your name and
It will be
address
very
for the
short.
record.
My name's April Estes. I live at 1606 Xerxes Avenue North. Since my husband passed, I'm the owner of Estes Funeral Chapel. We were in North Minneapolis for 62 years. When things was happening in North Minneapolis years ago, my husband decided he would stay there because he knew that he would be needed. And I just want to thank you all. As Bill said, I'm not a public speaker, but I do want to thank you for considering it. And I want to thank my city council person for considering it. We have helped so many people, and so many people has helped us. Since my husband passed, a lot of people from North Minneapolis has talked to me in the grocery stores, in Walgreens, wanting to know, Miss Estes, you going to keep the funeral chapel? And I could not make up my mind. I had to pray about it. But then I decided that I would. One lady came to me and she said, don't sell that chapel, Miss Estes. She said, because that's the only thing we have to call our own. So therefore, I want to just thank you for considering it. Thank you for listening to what we all have to say. And I just appreciate you voting yes to have this done, because my husband really, really deserved it. You would have to know him in order to understand what we're doing. He loved North Minneapolis. He's been gone 6 years. He loved North Minneapolis. I love North Minneapolis, and I'm sure all of you all probably don't know about North Minneapolis, but it's a wonderful place. Thank you.
Thank you. And is there anyone else who would like to speak on item 1? Anyone else? Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing. And commissioners, we just have the one application before us. Would someone like to make a motion? Commissioner Ellison.
We adopt the recommendation to change the name, commemorative name.
Second.
All right, and we have a motion and a second to approve the petition to add the commemorative name of Richard Estes Way to Plymouth Avenue North between Penn Avenue and Queen Avenue North. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we have a motion and a second to approve that petition. Clerk, please call the roll.
Coleman? Aye. Cogill?
Aye.
Ellison?
Aye.
Cronzer?
Aye.
Hickey-Peer? Aye. Magrino?
Aye.
Rockwell?
Aye.
Schrader?
Aye.
Sweezy? Aye. 9-0.
All right, and that motion carries. That concludes our discussion on item 1. Our next item for discussion is item 5, and staff, let's see here. Staff is Ms. Dvorak. Perhaps we can just have a brief presentation on this one as well, since we have kind of a long agenda tonight.
Item 5 is an application by Taco Bell for a 240 square foot addition to their existing fast food restaurant at 215 East Lake Street. We are recommending approval of both the conditional use permit for the addition and then also site plan review. I apologize, I was not prepared to speak to this item tonight because I wasn't where it was going to get pulled off, but we are recommending approval of both applications subject to conditions of approval, specifically on the site plan review relating to landscaping and screening of the parking lot, filling in some of the missing gaps within their landscaping plan that exist today, and then also in the proposed landscaping plan before you tonight. And I will stand for questions.
And commissioners, are there any questions of staff? Hearing none, I will open the public hearing for this item. I'd like to see if the applicant has anything to add to the staff presentation. Nothing to add. So we can move on to other speakers, and I think we just maybe have one or two speakers on this item, so please come to the microphone, state your name and address for the record.
I'm glad she didn't karaoke. Anyway, it's good to see you all. Happy New Year. Thank you. My name is Jay Webb. I'm the executive director of the International Gateway. And our corridor is along Blaisdell on Lake all the way to Columbus. And our initial purpose is to help boost the morale and boost the settings there on Lake Street. It's a challenge area. We all recognize that. The reason why I'm here is not necessarily to oppose the approval, but more so that there be that some things be addressed even more so. Because overall in that community, we're really lifting up. All the businesses are coming together. The people are coming together, working with city and staff all the time. Just see how we can make things better. Taco Bell is probably one of the most challenged places because of the way it's situated. It's prime suspect for loitering and drugs and prostitution. And the Lake Street Beat, they've been there, and but it's going to take more than just a Lake Street Beat. It's more than just a doctor to fix it, but the patient has to do some things as well. Where we're at right now is, a prime example is McDonald's across the street. It's a local business, but they're doing everything to keep the place clean, keep any vagrants out, and also to call and alert. And Connie, she's doing a great job over there. We just believe that Taco Bell should step up a little bit more and keeping the site clean and just being more proactive if they see someone that is doing something that's not not good for society, that they should alert us, as well as doing their best to keep the snow removed and keep these things on the whole trend, because that whole corridor of Lake Street is being it's getting stronger and stronger every time I see you guys. It gets better and better. So I think that before we approve anything, that we should also make sure that before they add on to the house, that they're taking care of the house that's already there, and that's not just inside but also out. And that's just also making concerted effort with the International Gateway, with the city of Minneapolis, and also with the police, and also with the local residents there. I think that would really help before we add on to a building, that we can make sure that everything's concentrated in their efforts. And I appreciate you guys' efforts. We're one of the best cities in the country. I always say that, but you're going to get tired of hearing me saying that, but I'm here, so I appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you. And is there anyone else who would like to speak? And please state your name and address for the record.
Robert Speeder, 120 South 6th Street, Minneapolis. I'm here as attorney for Sabri Properties, and I'm in the unusual position of opposing something. And Sabri Properties is clearly a very pro-business organization, but this is a neighbor to their headquarters right on Lake Street. And they've worked hard with International Gateway to try to clean up this part of Lake Street, about the 6 or 7 blocks east of 35W. And probably the most difficult neighbor is Taco Bell. And it's been a consistent, difficult neighbor. They, unlike McDonald's, which is able to, in this neighborhood, keep things clean, and I believe under the ordinance are supposed to pick up litter, certainly stuff from their establishment within 500 feet. McDonald's does it, Taco Bell doesn't. And it blows around the neighborhood, and that litter is what just brings neighborhoods down and is inviting to the riffraff that comes by. And it just speaks to it. And cleaning up is a big part, and it's an important part. And it's times like this when somebody's asking for a new site plan and conditional use permit when government can require new steps of an owner and a plan of an owner to address these things. So one would be the litter. Two, they're usually the last one to deal with snow on their sidewalks. Three, as part of the landscaping plan, the gravel they have in place is not maintained. It's always in the sidewalk. And one of the biggest ones, and maybe it's beyond this hearing here, but they are at that area at night, they hang out for prostitutes and drug dealers. And they simply don't have a good security plan in place to deal with that. And things could be much better on Lake Street if they did. And so we are urging that this either be denied or sufficient conditions be placed to address these issues. So the litter, the landscaping, the snow plowing, and the riffraff that's there at night. Thank you.
Thank you. And is there anyone else who would like to speak on item 5? Anyone else? Yes, you can. Okay, yeah, feel free to state your name and address for the record.
Peter Roos, Roos and Associates, 3513 Rainbow Drive, Minnetonka. Mr. Chair and Commissioners, I will say that we have a very challenged site only in that we have a bus stop in front of our store. McDonald's doesn't. We have spent a lot of time and effort to keep that area clean. It is a challenge, there's no doubt about it. But we haven't had any complaints that our operations people have. In the past, when we've had issues, not for several years, we have moved forward. We've worked with the police department. We haven't worked with Mr. Sabri. I know they're disappointed that we haven't participated in the International Gateway. We chose to deal with the Special Service District. We worked with the city in that capacity. We feel that we have a good security plan. We are going to be changing the gravel and doing things as part of the conditions of this conditional use permit. The landscaping plan will be adhered to, and we have to talk to the city about that. But the principal thing that I want to say is we're talking about replacing a cooler unit, a prefab cooler unit on the rear of the building, which will be more energy efficient, will amount to fewer truck traffic coming in to supply it. It's greener, and it's really 150 square feet more. And we realize when we come out of that footprint, we are subject to having our conditional use plan modified, but the hours, the internal operation, nothing is changing, and we will continue to work with the city, the police department, and the licensing folks, where this is probably a licensing purview if you want to really decide what you want to do with it. But we don't have a problem. We have talked to the police. Everything seems to be working fine. The litter, again, a challenge with the bus stop. A lot of it isn't our stuff, but we pick up 100 feet from the corners. So I'd ask you to approve this with the understanding that the conditions are going to be dealt with the city, and that the other opportunity is to talk to licensing, and if they're not happy, they need to come to us. But we are good neighbors. We've been there since 1994. It was a Zantigo in '87. It's an old building that we've maintained, and it's a very successful business, and we hope that we could have your support.
Great, thank you. And is there anyone else who would like to speak on this item? Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing. And Commissioners, we have the 2 applications, conditional use permit and site plan review. Would someone like to make a motion? Commissioner Kranz.
I have a question for staff. Is the third condition under the site plan intended to imply that all of the rock mulch on the site would be replaced?
That wasn't the intention, given the sheer volume of rock mulch that exists. Every landscape bed on this site is covered in rock mulch. Mm-hmm. However, the intent was to see more green than rock, to help stop it from falling over the edge onto the
So
sidewalks
it sounds like the
or into
intent
the site.
is there.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Rockwell.
One more quick question for Steph. Hillary, is there any lighting on the cooler?
Is there what? I'm sorry.
Lighting?
Lighting? I don't believe there's lighting on the cooler, but we should ask the applicant to confirm.
Yeah, I would ask the applicant to confirm that, since one of the concerns is loitering around the area.
Yeah, the cooler area, there's not lights on the cooler box itself, but up above on the perimeter, up on the mansard, the whole thing is lit up.
It's well lit down.
Yeah, and
It's
it is well lit, and I don't know, Hillary, you were out there on site and looked at our lighting with the downlights and what we have. I mean, we're meeting the requirement. And if people think we need to add some additional lighting or something, we certainly can, but that's never been an issue that we're aware of.
Okay, thank you.
Right, and any further questions, or would someone like to make a motion? Commissioner Kranzer.
I'll move staff recommendations to approve the conditional use permit with the one stated condition.
And we have a motion and a second to approve the conditional use permit with the one stated condition. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we have a motion and a second. Clerk, please call a roll.
Coleman. Aye. Colgill.
No.
Ellison.
Aye.
Kranzer.
Aye.
Lipke Pier.
Aye.
Magrino.
Aye.
Rockwell.
Aye.
Schrader.
Aye.
Sweezy. Aye. 8-1.
That motion carries. Commissioner Kranzer, would you like to continue?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to adopt staff recommendation, approve the site plan review with the 6 stated conditions.
Second.
And we have a motion and a second to approve item B, the site plan review with the 6 stated conditions. Is there a second? Oh, we do have a second. Any discussion? Commissioner Rockwell.
Just very briefly, I would like to be able to put conditions on the pickup and snow shoveling and so forth. I think is a really important. I'm just having trouble seeing that as a connection to a cooler replacement. So I won't, but I would encourage neighbors, encourage Taco Bell to be proactive on that. I would encourage neighbors to make sure to call the city and keep them accountable as needed. And that's not really the purview of the Planning Commission generally, and it's definitely not really connected to this particular application. But that doesn't mean I don't think it's an issue.
Right. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we have a motion and a second to approve item B, the site plan review. Clerk, please call a roll.
Coleman. Aye. Colgill.
No.
Ellison.
Aye.
Kranzer.
Aye.
Lipke Pier.
Aye.
Magrino.
Aye.
Rockwell.
Aye.
Schrader.
Aye.
Sweezy. Aye. That is 8-1.
And that motion carries. That concludes our discussion on item 5. Our next item for discussion is item 7, Marcy Open School, and staff is Ms. Wallace. And again, perhaps we can just have a brief presentation on this one.
Good evening, Commissioners. The site before you is Marcy Open School, which is 307 to 323 4th Street Southeast and 414 3rd Avenue Southeast. The application is for a conditional use permit and site plan review for a just over 10,000 square foot addition to an existing K-12 school that's mostly located in the interior of the site. The addition would be used for a cafeteria and mechanical equipment and the kitchen uses. Here's a photo of the site. So the site shares a block with Holmes Park. The proposed addition is located on the interior of the site. I believe that the potential comments might have to do with conditions of approval, so I'll focus on that. Staff is recommending approval of the conditional use permit and site plan review. The project was evaluated for alternative compliance for a number of items, some of which are existing conditions on the site, which are not necessarily exacerbated by the addition. And then there are some landscaping and screening requirements. So you'll find conditions of approval that recommend some enhanced landscaping, that there be 75 shrubs on site, that there be landscaping and screening along the the existing parking lot, and in between the parking lot and the park. Here, and I can get to the landscaping plan here. One unfortunate thing with the site is that you can see in this photo, there's a peace garden that is located currently on the site that was implemented in conjunction with community members. That contains a significant amount of landscaping and some walkways. As part of the addition, this peace garden area would have to be removed and then re-implemented. The neighborhood organization had recommended, might be the end here. The neighborhood group had recommended 3 conditions of approval that should have been emailed to you, and I can put them up on the screen here. The conditions, the first condition is that the school work with community partners to re-implement the peace garden. Staff has recommended a condition that the required 75 shrubs be implemented on site, with notes in the staff report that be negotiated with the community partners. There are 2 other conditions, one regarding working with the park board to implement the park board master plan, and the third one is working with Public Works on construction safety on the site. These are not typical conditions that staff would implement in relation to the zoning requests, because these things are either going to be handled through the relationship with the park board or through construction permits. So unless there are any clarifying questions, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, and commissioners, are there any questions of staff? Hearing none, I will open the public hearing on this item. I'd like to give the applicant an opportunity to respond to anything. Is anyone here on behalf of the applicant? Is there anything you'd like to add to the staff presentation? All right, so we can move on to other speakers, and please come to the microphone, state your name and address for the record.
My name's Jacqueline Decker Travis, and I live at 608 7th Avenue Southeast. I am the coordinator for the Marcy Labyrinth Path to Peace, which I think, to clarify, it's not a peace garden. It's a 10-year-old project. It has about a $480,000 investment, including a TCF neighborhood grant for the Labyrinth pattern, a Mississippi watershed rain garden that was just installed a year ago, where Minneapolis Public Schools was a fiscal agent on. So we have considerable investment from students pulling out of their piggy banks to buy bricks on the pathway, to community members, to the neighborhood association. So lots of folks are very invested. Originally, it was proposed to us that it was going to be taken apart and meticulously stored, and then put back in its place when the renovation was done. That has since changed. So our site is going to be reduced about 40%. It is a peace site, and that's an international peace site, Marcy Open School. So there's some sacred properties to it. Folks have scattered ashes. It's used as a memorial, had weddings there. People walk it for meditation. So it's important to the kind of makeup of Marcy Open School, and why it's a waiting list school and very successful site. So what we're asking is that the design be looked at to not interrupt that back to the original. Originally, we were told that it changed, the design had to change because over estimates in the budget. It's important to the school and important to the community, and I think you can see that from the letter from Marcy Holmes. Also, that we want some sort of agreement from MPS that is going to be taken seriously and it's going to be followed through on, because things change on a weekly basis. And so we're kind of just reacting and really wanting to let people know how important that project is to the community. And not everything is about expansion. If it's done smart, we can coexist with what's there and what's valued. Thank you.
Thank you. And is there anyone else who would like to speak on this item? Anyone else? And please state your name and address for the record.
Hi, I'm Eric Wunderlich. I live at 413 5th Street Southeast, maybe representing the Marcy Homes Neighborhood Association on this topic. We've worked with the project planners, Minneapolis Public Schools, for several months, and the initial commitment seemed very positive, the commitment to replace the labyrinth and the path to peace. So I would speak strongly, Jackie's already talked about it, but the first condition in the neighborhood letter to commit to the original intent of dismantling and storing and reconstructing that asset in a way that's agreeable to the members of the community. And the second condition is regarding working with the Minneapolis Park and Rec Board on the East of the River Master Plan. The park is accessed regularly by residents of the neighborhood. We're concerned about conflicting with school traffic, et cetera, as people walk across the park. There really is a critical relationship there between the park and the school playground and the way that it interacts with the neighborhood. So I think that condition too is appropriate to be added to this project in approval. And then the third item, working with the neighborhood to mitigate the traffic concerns. That is the 5th Street Southeast Historic District. That's a relatively narrow one-way street. There's already a lot of traffic because of the other construction traffic in the neighborhood and just the freeway traffic. There's a lot of traffic that uses 5th Street as a arterial street, basically northwest bound. Done right, construction traffic could be routed into the site from 4th Street to enter and exit the site. Any traffic that needs to transit the site, we feel should enter the site from the 5th Street side and exit out on 4th Street rather than the reverse that would put construction traffic out onto 5th Street. School buses can hardly make the corners off of 5th Street. It's hard to imagine that construction traffic would be able to navigate 5th Street. It's also a bicycle boulevard. There's a lot of bicycle traffic on the street. It also would keep construction traffic away from the front of the school, separate the construction traffic from the school buses and parents pick up and drop off and all the other traffic. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And is there anyone else who would like to speak on item 7? And please state your name and address for the record.
My name's Bill Hunsicker. I live at 415 8th Street Southeast, 4 blocks from the park and the school. My children played in the park, and they're adults now, but they went to that school. And I just want to underline what Jackie and Eric have already said and be very assured that the 18-wheelers will not go through the neighborhood during the construction. They need to stay off of the one-way street. I saw an 18-wheeler go down there mistakenly the other day. He had to back up 3 blocks in order to avoid going across the bump outs in which neighbors have planted flower beds on each corner. And so we need to be very careful about the construction mitigation. And I want to applaud the school board and its staff for working with the neighborhood, as they've done very well so far. We had thought some of those considerations which have been put into the record now would be part of the formal plan, but we're happy with the way this is going. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And is there anyone else who would like to speak? Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing. And commissioners, we just have 2 applications before us, conditional use permit and site plan review. Are there any further questions? Commissioner Ronzer.
Question for the applicant about the landscape plan. So I see in the floor plan that you have symbols for trees and shrubs. I'm just wondering if you've picked out any specific shrubs. The area of concern I have is that inside corner that points to the north and east. I've heard arborvitae thrown out from the staff. I'm wondering if you thought about the visibility and the kind of graffiti prevention with the landscaping and inside corner. Those are areas where graffiti artists like to tag.
I was checking with the architect. It sounds like we haven't picked a particular species yet, but we can take that into consideration.
I would just raise that concern anywhere you're planting against the building where it's blank walls and there's not a lot of visibility towards the park. Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Right. And Commissioner Rockwell and Commissioner Lupke-Peer.
Could you speak to the labyrinth? I mean, I note that on your city submittal, you indicate that you would be dismantling and storing the labyrinth for reinstallations, and that's a concern of the neighborhood. Can you speak to what the plan is?
Yeah, absolutely. We've already selected our contractor on this site, and they have a tangible plan to. The labyrinth is comprised of small concrete pavers about this big. There are thousands of them. Do you know how many? 4,000 of them. It's a complicated puzzle. And our intention is to take them up, carefully document it, take it up in pallet-sized pieces of that puzzle to make reassembly more straightforward, and to store those pallets on site carefully and replace anything that may get damaged in the process.
Is there a reinstallation site picked? I mean, it looks like the addition goes over part of the existing.
Correct. In one of the pages of your submittal, you'll see a new area that we left blank intentionally, because this area will be re-envisioned over the next 12 months with the Marcy Homes Neighborhood Association and the Labyrinth Committee to see how exactly it will be reinstalled. So at this point, we don't have a design for it, but our intention is that it will be approximately the same size as it is now.
Okay. And would you be open to just having us add that as working with Marcy Homes Neighborhood?
Absolutely.
As a condition? Well, thanks.
Yep.
All right, Commissioner Lupke-Peer, you didn't have anything?
Question got answered.
Okay. Any further questions? If there are none, would someone like to start things off with a motion? Commissioner Ellison.
I motion that, that we accept staff recommendation to approve the application for a conditional use permit with the one stated condition.
Right. And we have a motion and a second to approve item A, the conditional use permit with the one stated condition. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we have a motion and a second. Clerk, please call the roll.
Coleman.
Aye.
Colgill.
Aye.
Ellison.
Aye.
Cruiser.
Aye.
Lipke-Peer. Aye. Magrino.
Aye.
Rockwell.
Aye.
Schrader.
Aye.
Squeezy. Aye. 9-0.
And that motion carries. Moving along to item B. Commissioner Rockwell.
I will move site plan review with the 12 stated conditions, adding a 13th to work with the Marcy Homes Neighborhood Association and Labyrinth Committee to find an appropriate site for reconstructing the existing labyrinth garden.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to approve item B, the site plan review with the 12 stated conditions, adding a 13th that the applicant work with the neighborhood association and its committee on reinstallation of the labyrinth, finding suitable location. Is there any discussion? If there is no discussion, we have a motion and a second to approve item B, the site plan review. Clerk, please call the roll.
Coleman.
Aye.
Colgill.
Aye.
Ellison.
Aye.
Cruiser.
Aye.
Lipke-Peer.
Aye.
Magrino.
Aye.
Rockwell.
Aye.
Schrader.
Aye.
Squeezy.
Aye.
9-0.
And that motion carries. That concludes our discussion on item 7. Our next item for discussion is item 8 on Bryant Avenue South. Staff is Ms. Smith.
Good evening, President Brown and Commissioners. So the subject site contains 3 parcels that are located between Lake Street and the Midtown Greenway. They're located facing Bryant Avenue South. The applications that are required for the 6-story building are a conditional use permit to increase height above 4 stories, variance to increase the maximum FAR in the C2 district from 2.125 to 3.55, and also site plan review. So here's an aerial shot of the site. It's just a few blocks east of the Lynn Lake Activity Center. Actually, it's one block to the west, I'm sorry, of the Lynn Lake Activity Center, and Lake Street is a commercial corridor here. Here's some renderings provided by the applicant showing the proposed building in the context of its block. There are a number of commercial uses along the stretch of Bryant, even though it's replacing 3 single-family homes. So the building overall would have an L shape. The second floor amenity deck would have some landscaping on there, and that portion faces Bryant Avenue South. The applicant is proposing essentially a 1-foot setback off the north property line, which is next to a commercial use, and a 9-foot setback off of the south property line that's adjacent to a residential use. Here's a view of the floor plan. You can see that there's some walk-up units, 2 walk-up units facing Bryant, and also the residential lobby is facing Bryant. Then the alley is surveying the west side of the property, and that's where the cars would be accessing the site. I would also mention that the landscaping plan does require alternative compliance because the site does not have any on-site canopy trees, and they'd be required to provide one. So staff is recommending a condition of approval that one be provided in the area, presumably between the building and the south lot line, where there's a 9-foot setback. For the floor plans, we are recommending a condition of approval that that there be a commercial space provided, a minimum of 1,000 square feet in area. So it's up to the applicant to determine where it would be along Bryant, but we feel that that would help to meet the intent of a density bonus that would normally be provided for an FAR request of this nature. They're currently obtaining the density bonus for providing enclosed parking, but they have not obtained the mixed-use commercial density bonus, which would actually require 2,700 square feet. So staff felt that 1,000 square feet could meet the intent of that density bonus that they would not be actually achieving. The elevations also require some alternative compliance and are leading to some of the conditions of approval that you found. So they're proposing 3 different colors of the 7/16 inch fiber cement panel, 4 colors of the 5/16 inch fiber cement panel, also brick, precast concrete, which is more of an accent material, composite wood panel, and metal panel as the building's exterior materials. So staff finds that it would be reasonable to limit the overall number of materials to 3 per elevation, excluding the color variations, and that would comply with the intent of this policy. There are also some blank walls. So there are 2 blank walls exceeding 25 feet on the north elevation that faces the commercial property, and as well as the Midtown Greenway area. The ground floor blank wall is 122 feet in length, and that's adjacent to the at-grade parking area. And then the blank wall on the upper floors of levels 3 through 6 is 27 feet in length. And we're recommending that they mitigate the blank walls on the upper floors because they're going to be very visible, and that could be accomplished either by adding recesses and projections in the building wall, or by increasing the distance of that building wall to the north property line to allow for additional window openings. And then here are a few other elevations. Here's a list of their exterior materials. And then here's the view facing Bryant. And from the south, here's a view from the alley. Bryant again, with a patio on the second floor roof. And there is a neighborhood group letter in support with a few caveats that were added to it. And I wanted to note that in the staff report and in the recommended action that you have tonight, the 6 stories was missing from the conditional use permit action. So if you do intend to change the staff recommendation, I would note that the 6 stories be added to the 71 feet. Thank you.
All right, and commissioners, are there any questions of staff? If there are none, I'll open the public hearing for this item. I'd like to ask the applicant to speak first, so please come to the microphone, state your name and address for the record.
Thank you, Chair and Commissioners. I'm Aaron Johnson, 4053 Bryant Avenue South. We'd like the chance to open up for discussion the conditions B1, B2, C4, and C5. Have something we can put on the overhead. The first condition being one of requesting a retail space or a commercial space on the ground floor. We have looked at, but I'm here to explain that we have made changes in the design to keep the spirit and the intent of the ordinance, where we have included, storefront on our lobby to keep the retail look. We've also pushed amenities towards Bryant Avenue to maintain active uses on Bryant Avenue, and we have also added lighting as requested in our COW to the facade at the ground floor on Bryant, so that we're adding some light to a dimly lit mid-block area of the street, which was also requested by the neighborhood. And with that, I'd also like to introduce the applicant of Hall Sweeney and Yellow Tree to speak on this matter also.
Good evening, Commissioners. Rob Lubenow with Yellow Tree, live at 46th and Park. Just want to speak to the commercial condition of approval. Just kind of give you a look back from when we started designing the project. We feel Yellow Tree that it is very important to have commercial space and community amenities within our building and also provide it to the larger neighborhood. But looking at this area, we thought not being on a corner, being on Lake Street, and also all the changes that are happening along this corridor with the Mexican Fusion, recently hearing about all the stores that have either transitioned, changing out, swapping, that this isn't the best spot. It may be in the future, but it isn't right now. So the best way to activate the front is to provide housing, so walk-up units. And that was intentionally done, but it was also intentionally done knowing that it could be reversed and changed. So as the neighborhood changes, so can the plan to provide, maybe it's amenities as a commercial space, but right now it should be housing. There's still a lot of active or not active, and even dormant space that's been developed 4 or 5 years ago. So with that direction and working with DJR, it was how we defined, what is the walk-up space, but also knowing that that can be reversed. So if there is stabilization in the commercial industry kind of on Lynn Lake, even going into Uptown in the future, those could be made commercial spaces and even expanded into the parking structure. So if it's 1 or 2 tenants in the future, the space could be larger for commercial uses as they become available. The worst thing that we could have is vacant commercial, which there's a lot of in this area. So that was kind of the backdrop and how we decided to have walk-up units to meet the active uses versus commercial.
All right. There are also 3 other items we'd like to discuss. The next one is item B2 and C4, which are pretty much the same condition in regards to blank walls. And just to clarify, the area we're talking about on the north side is this area, which a blank wall by our code is labeled as 25 feet in linear length. This is 27.4, so it's 2 feet 4 inches too big, which makes it considered a blank wall. We have in the past pushed back a recess in this location to provide modulation on that north side. And we would ask that this condition be struck because we've modified this building already, and we're also trying to kind of plan for the future of this neighborhood in that this north side currently has, a one-story office building on that. That could be subject to change in the future. Somebody might build directly next to, or potentially build directly next to this building where the condition is asking for transparency that might in the future be highly possible to be blocked by another project. The last item we'd like to talk about is item C5, which has to do with the number of materials. I believe every facade on this building has more than 3 primary materials. However, we felt it was necessary to have the number of materials that we had to provide modulation, to provide a legitimate base, middle, and top that helps scale the building to a residential feeling for this neighborhood. And if we were to eliminate some materials to fall within that 3 material limit, we feel that this building could closely be turned into a white box, which is a comment we had in our neighborhood meeting is that they liked to see the depth on the design and didn't want a plain white box in their neighborhood just stuck in the middle. And I believe that's all the conditions we are here to discuss.
And commissioners, are there any questions of the applicant? Commissioner Kronzer.
I'm wondering if you could have your architect walk around the building and point out the different materials. 'Cause from the renderings, it seems like there aren't that many materials on it, but maybe they're so similar in color. I think it would be helpful for that.
Sure. So on the east facade, we have a white cementitious panel. We also have a wood composite. We have brick on the base. We also have a yellow paint for a door, and then a small amount of metal panel. And that likewise goes for most of all the elevations. For the south side, I believe we do fall, that's the only side that might fall into the 3 primary material limit, which there is brick on the bottom of the building, and you just can't see it in this rendering. On the west side, we do have that wood composite, and then we have a white cementitious panel and a dark cementitious panel and a blend, so that is 4 materials, and it's over the 3 material limit. Yeah.
And Commissioner Coleman.
I have a question about the blank wall. What's going on in the building on the opposite side of the blank wall?
It is a unit on all 4 floors that the condition is calling out, levels 3 through 6.
Could you bring up the floor plan?
Yeah. Okay. So, Commissioner, the area we're speaking about is the unit right here.
So it looks like there is, if I'm reading that correctly, 2 windows on the east side for that entire unit?
That's correct.
And your choice is a blank wall instead of another window for the unit?
Yes, first, this building is a foot off of that property line, so to actually have a window by fire code, we'd have to push back that wall significantly. Our other option is to push it back and recess to mitigate that blank wall issue. However, this probably sheds more light on the point I was making earlier that to the north of this site, being at 1 foot off the property line, somebody does have the opportunity to build in the future and cover whatever transparency that we would put on the north side.
Thank you.
Any further questions of the applicant? If there are none, we can see if there's anyone else who would like to speak on this item. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on item 8? And please come to the microphone, state your name and address for the record.
Hi, I'm Zach Anderson. I live at 1511 Lagoon, but I work at 910 West Lake, which is the commercial building that is directly south of this on the same block. Now, I'm not here to talk about the aesthetics of the building, which unfortunately matches the rest of the developments in Uptown. I would like to comment that this blank wall, we already have a huge graffiti problem on the 2 large blank walls from the High Point Printmaking Center at the other end of the alley and on our building. So we already have graffiti problems, and a blank wall is going to be a nightmare. They're going to have to be out there sandblasting that all the time, guaranteed. No, I'm here to ask about the construction noise because I'm really scared that it's going to drive away all our business all summer. You know, I live across the street from what they're doing to the former Sons of Norway building, and I had to hear a pile driver mounted to a crane jamming I-beams into the bedrock all summer. And we're really, really scared that's what's going to happen here. Now, I can't provide tarot card readings to my clients with this in the background. I know that directly north, there's a healing center with therapists and other different kinds of people that require a serene environment. They're not going to be able to provide any kind of services. We're all going to lose a whole bunch of money, and we're worried, frankly, the building owner is worried that the ceiling, that the plaster is going to start collapsing if that's what they do. So they're probably going to build the building. I would urge y'all to put a huge noise-like thing limiting it maybe 90 decibels, okay? Because that's going to kill that corner if we have to have that kind of construction noise all summer. So as long as they're not using giant cranes and I-beams to pile drive into the bedrock all summer, I mean, I guess you can't stop progress. But I just really, really strongly urge you guys to be extremely sensitive to the maybe more tactful but not available to come to the meeting business owners on my block. So, thanks.
All right, thank you. And is there anyone else who would like to speak on item 8? Seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing. And commissioners, we have 3 applications before us. Commissioner Lupke here.
Yes, I have a question for the applicant. Just referencing the previous speaker's testimony, can you possibly walk us through a little bit of your site plan management in terms of sound and noise mitigation, and also whether or not you'll be monitoring vibrations for adjacent buildings to see if there's damage to them or not?
Good evening. Yes, we do. Well, first of all, we do site surveys of our property, every neighboring property, even city improvements to sidewalks, light poles as they may be. We have met with the neighbors to the north and to the south. Actually, just last Friday, we met with the south neighbors. So as part of the monitoring, if they're open to us surveying their property and their conditions, yes, we do that prior to any work being done. We also do on-site monitoring while we're doing any excavation or anything that has significant vibrations to it. So that is directly relayed to a phone. So anytime that they meet over a certain decibel level or frequency, it notifies by text message. And that's just standard construction that we do to make sure that it's contained to reasonable levels on site.
And can you connect with the previous speaker after this hearing to exchange information? So
sure.
Thank you.
Right. And Are there any further questions, or would someone like to start things off with a motion? Commissioner Cogill.
I will move item A, a conditional use permit, to approve the conditional use permit to increase the maximum height of a building in the C2 neighborhood corridor commercial district from 4 stories, 56 feet to 71 feet 6 inches. The one stated condition.
All right, and we have a motion to approve item A, the conditional use permit, and I'll note that staff had suggested also adding in for that maximum height, a height of 6 stories in addition to 71 feet 6 inches. That has one stated condition. Is there a second? So we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Coleman.
Aye.
Cogill.
Aye.
Ellison.
Aye.
Cronzer.
Aye.
Lipkeeper.
Aye.
Negrino.
Aye.
Rockwell.
Aye.
Schrader.
Aye.
Sweetie.
Aye.
9-0.
And that motion carries. Moving along, would someone like to make a motion on item B? Commissioner Coleman.
I would like to move item B, the variance, without the 2 stated conditions, and I'll talk to that if there's a second.
Second.
Right, we have a motion and a second to approve item B, the variance with no conditions, or removing the 2 recommended conditions by staff. And Commissioner Coleman.
So regarding condition 1, the 1,000 square foot of commercial, I am very sympathetic to property developers in this retail age where we have, in my opinion, overbuilt retail. We have a lot of empty storefronts. We hear of stores closing in this area frequently. I think the owners have presented themselves as being very flexible with the space and very thoughtful, and have given very thoughtful consideration to the market and the location and the design.
Thank you. And Commissioner Magrino, then Commissioner Rockwell.
Yeah, similarly, I think that this applicant in the past has kind of gone above and beyond what we would expect for retail space and the several projects that they've done in the past year or two. And so I think in this case, if they don't want to do it, there's probably a compelling commercial reason why they wouldn't want that space to sit empty. It is kind of off of Lake Street a bit. And so I do see that they would probably have trouble leasing that space. And so I would support that motion.
And Commissioner Rockwell.
Similar to Commissioner Magrino, I want to underscore that I sort of believe the applicant, because the applicant has put forth a lot of more commercial on 38th Street than we've seen on Nicollet Mall in other projects, and it's noted. And so, I do hope that there is potential here. This is kind of on the edge of a commercial district. And I also know there are art studios nearby here, and so there's potential for retail more broadly as creating an arts district in this area. Within 1 block of here, I think there's 2 or 3 other art studios. I just wanted to underscore that sort of working relationship has been good here.
And Commissioner Lupke-Peer.
I just wanted to state I will not be supporting the motion as it stands. While I certainly am relatively indifferent to whether or not condition number 1 remains as it is, it actually is outside of our purview as to whether or not this applicant has done good projects in the past. We're looking at this application, and I think that the flexibility that they've worked into it is compelling alone, but their previous projects are kind of not really have nothing to do with this project. That being said, I do not so I could go either way on condition number 1, but condition number 2 I absolutely think is needed. I think that when I looked through the packet and saw the elevations, I think it stands out like a sore thumb. I think it's an eyesore, quite frankly. I think that there's a reason we have it set at the linear feet we do for blank walls, and I understand that it's more rentable square footage to not jog back to allow windows because you're going to be 5 feet from the property line. But I think that that's needed for a reason, and I think it's very unattractive, to be honest, and it's exactly an illustration of why we have the blank wall provision we do. So I'm very unsympathetic to losing condition 2. I think that that's a really relevant and critical condition as a part of that variance. So I will not be supporting the motion as it stands.
Right. And Commissioner Rockwell?
Are you offering an amendment or just stating that you're not supporting the
I
motion?
would love an amendment to that, although I have a feeling that I'm not sure Commissioner Coleman would be amenable to that or not. But if this motion does not pass, then I would propose that we have a revised variance request.
Right. And Commissioner Coleman?
I'm not amenable to a friendly amendment. However, there are other types of amendments.
All right. And I guess maybe at this point we should just vote on this motion if there is no further discussion. If it fails, we can certainly consider an alternate motion. So is there any further discussion on this motion to approve item B, the variance with no conditions? Hearing none, clerk, please call a roll.
Coleman?
Aye.
Colgill?
No.
Ellison?
No.
Kranzer?
Aye.
Lipke-Pier?
No.
Magrino?
Aye.
Rockwell?
No.
Schrader?
Aye.
Sweezy? No. So that is 4 yeses and 5 noes.
All right, so that motion fails. And Commissioner Coleman?
I would make the motion to approve the variance with the second stated condition.
Second.
Right, so we have a motion and a second to approve item B, the variance, striking the first recommended condition related to commercial space and including the second condition, which relates to mitigating the blank walls on levels 3 through 6. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we have a motion and a second to approve item B with one condition related to mitigating blank walls. And clerk, please call the roll.
Coleman?
Aye.
Colgill?
Aye.
Ellison?
Aye.
Kranzer?
No.
Lipke-Pier?
Aye.
Magrino?
Aye.
Rockwell?
Aye.
Schrader?
Aye.
Sweezy? No. 7 to 2.
And that motion carries. Moving along to item C, the site plan review. Would someone like to make a motion? Commissioner Rockwell.
I will move site plan review with all stated conditions except eliminating condition number 5.
Second.
Right, we have a motion and a second to approve item C, the site plan review with the 7 stated conditions, but striking condition 5. Is there any discussion? If there is no, Commissioner McGreen.
Yeah, I'll just say, I think in general we want to be cautious when we have a whole lot of materials on the side of a building, because you sometimes get that kind of messy collage look on a lot of buildings when it's just a flat box with a bunch of random material changes. But I think this is pretty clearly an articulated facade that has a few different massings, and I think that this will look good as proposed.
All right, is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we have a motion and a second to approve item C, the site plan review. Clerk, please call the roll.
Coleman?
Aye.
Colgill?
Aye.
Ellison?
Aye.
Kranzer?
Aye.
Lipke-Pier?
Aye.
Magrino?
Aye.
Rockwell?
Aye.
Schrader?
Aye.
Sweezy? No. That's 8 to 1.
All right, and that motion carries. That concludes our discussion on item 8. Next item for discussion is item 10, Lydia Apartments. Staff is Ms. Dvorak.
Item number 10 is Lydia House. It is located at 1914 and 1920 LaSalle Avenue. The applicant is Beacon Interfaith Housing Collaborative. They are here for an addition to the existing facility, which was established back in 2003 as a 40-unit supportive housing facility. They're proposing a 40-unit addition to that existing building. Located on the block, the same block, excuse me, as the property is the Van Dusen Mansion and the Semple Mansion, both of which are locally designated historic properties in the city. And then the Minnesota Council of Churches, which is to the west. The Lydia House building is not historically designated, and this is not a district. So you have two individually designated properties on each side of this existing facility. They are, as I said, they're proposing a 40-unit addition to the north side of the existing building. It's a 6-story addition. So this is the footprint of the addition, and then this is the existing property. North is to the right on your screen. And then the parking lot that exists in this lot right now will be modified to accommodate for that addition. There are 4 applications before you. One is a conditional use permit to expand the existing supportive housing use. A conditional use permit to increase the height of the building from 4 stories or 56 feet to 6 stories or 67 feet. A variance of the front yard setback along LaSalle Avenue from 15 feet down to 1 foot, and then site plan review for what is approximately a 24,000 square foot addition to the building. We are recommending approval of all applications subject to conditions. The conditional use permit for the use, we are recommending approval. The conditional use permit for the height, the addition is 2 stories or 11 feet taller than what is allowed. Here is an aerial image that was created by the applicant that shows that addition to the existing building. The massing of the building, as you can see, has been pushed to the north side of the existing building and away from the other properties. The addition itself will be 29 feet from that north property line here, and then 100 feet from that south property line here. So this, again, this is the extent of the addition proposed. The height of the building is compatible with the existing building and the surrounding buildings on the block. The Van Dusen Mansion and the Semple Mansion are both 3 stories in height. However, given when they were constructed and what they were constructed for, they are grander in appearance. They have taller floor-to-ceiling heights. The building, the Minnesota Council of Churches to the west, is a 6-story building. And then if you looked at the block, if you drove or walked around the block or looked at it on Google Street Maps, the grade changes on this block are kind of all over the place. And so given the grade changes, the first floor of all 3 of the existing buildings sit at least a floor taller than the existing Lydia House apartments, which would then makes things a little bit more even in height when you're looking at this block. The addition will not block views of the existing buildings. I did take some images from Google Maps today. So this is looking at the corner, or sitting at the corner of Groveland and LaSalle Avenue. And so the Lydia Apartments is in back of the addition that was on the Van Dusen Mansion. And then here is an image from LaSalle Avenue in front of the existing building, and you can't see the Semple Mansion in back of it. Oh, excuse me. You can't see the Semple Mansion sitting in back of this, and the addition is going to be here in the foreground of the picture. And so you can see when you're driving that while it is a 6-story addition, it is not going to block views of those properties, and LaSalle is a one-way heading south. And I would just note that the intent of the standard is to preserve public view corridors, not to protect private views from private developments of the surroundings. So we are recommending approval of the conditional use permit for height. The setback variance, it is not actually for the addition. It is to enclose 3 porches that are existing on the property. There is a portion of the building that juts out that is 1 foot from the property line. These are 3 stacked balconies. Those are going to be enclosed, and so therefore this portion, it's an additional 15 linear feet of building that will be enclosed. That is what the variance request is for, and we found that there are practical difficulties on the site given that it is existing, the balconies exist, and they will be enclosing those, and so we are recommending approval of the setback variance. And then for site plan review, here is just an image that was taken from their materials. They do meet most of the standards except for some of the landscaping and screening, and some of that has to do with the fact that they have parking off of the alley, that if we were to screen that, then you would not be able to access those, and no one would have access to those parking spaces moving into the future. And so we are recommending alternative compliance for those items under site plan review. And like I said, we are recommending approval, and I will stand for any questions.
And commissioners, are there any questions of staff? If there are none, I will open the public hearing for this item. I'd like to give the applicant an opportunity to speak first. So if someone would like to come to the microphone, state your name and address for the record.
Hello, President Brown and Planning Commissioners. My name is Kevin Walker. I'm Director of New Projects at Beacon Interfaith Housing Collaborative. My address, home address or work address?
Work address is fine.
Okay, 2610 University Avenue West, Suite 100, St. Paul, Minnesota. Let's see, thanks for hearing our various land use related applications for this Lydia Apartments project. As you know, Lydia Apartments was developed as a response by church and lay leaders to homelessness appearing literally on the doorsteps of Plymouth Congregational Church right across the street. This has been a very successful operating property as it converted an abandoned nursing home to a vital 40-unit sober living community and has been an important asset to the community for 15 years. Beacon owns and operates the property with our management agent, Common Bond Communities, and our service provider, Avivo. Lydia Apartments is home to a very warm and welcoming community for residents who have experienced homelessness. In our proposed rehabilitation and expansion, we wish to improve the existing building and serve an additional 40 tenants. Consistent with our standard due diligence, we reached out in the spring of last year to our adjoining neighbors, the Minnesota Church Center, with its 6-story building to our west, which is, as Hillary covered, is a taller building, just factoring in topography. The Van Dusen to our north, the Semple Mansion to our south, and Plymouth Congregational Church to our east. Based on the feedback we've received, we made some design adjustments to our preliminary plans, which you see reflected in the submittal before you. We have also met with Stevens Square Community Organization, both in the design and financing application stages, and received their support for this project. We have found broad support for this project among our public financing and funding partners. We have significant financing committed to this project, state tax credits, other financing from Minnesota Housing, and nearly $2 million in affordable trust funds from the city of Minneapolis. We appreciate your review of our development and look forward to moving ahead. Lastly, I would note that representatives of 5 of our 90-plus congregations in our collaborative are here to reflect their support of this important project. Thank you.
Right, thank you. And commissioners, are there any questions of the applicant? If there are none, we can move on to some other speakers. And just so I have a sense, how many of you would like to speak on this item? Can I see a show of hands? How many people would like to speak? So we have a handful. We can start over on this side of the room, and you can decide who goes first. State your name and address for the record.
My name is Melissa Fritz. My address is 100. My work address is, I'm a resident of Minneapolis, but my work address is at the Semple Mansion, 100 West Franklin Avenue, Suite 105, Minneapolis 55404. I am here I have been a resident of Minneapolis, and I've been a tenant housing my business called Minneapolis in the Semple Mansion since 2006. I'm going to show you. This is my view from my office. I am here to express 3 main concerns about this project. Number one, the effects that this project has on two significant Minneapolis and nationally registered historic properties. The Semple Mansion and the Van Dusen Mansion, excuse me. It is my understanding that Beacon Interfaith has other properties in Minneapolis and surrounding communities that I don't know have been considered for an alternative to this very good project. It's just this project in between two very significant Minneapolis landmark properties, historic properties, is a big issue. I've watched the Semple Mansion since 2006 go from, it was Franklin Bank. It was very run down. These owners put, to just see over 14 years what has gone into the restoration and preservation of this property. And then the juxtaposition of over the 10 years or 12 years that I've been a tenant of the Semple Mansion, I have seen the Lydia Apartments is constantly scattered with trash, overgrown. Their windows, the paint is chipping and falling off. There's constant loitering in our parking lot, in our trash bins, at our doorstep. On one occasion, as I'm working in my office in the evening, I see a resident of the Lydia Apartments looking down on me, masturbating. Now, I also understand both of these historic properties in between this Lydia Apartments house weddings. So I see that as an issue that either we value historic properties in the city of Minneapolis or we don't, because there are alternative sites for this housing project. So again, I'm concerned about the negative impact, not only that this has on the two historic property owners, it also has a significant impact on their tenants, their businesses, by doubling the size of an already existing rundown building that they have been managing for, what did he say, over 10 years, and they're not keeping up this property to a standard that should be a Minneapolis standard. And so my concern is, if you make this approval, and great, and everybody feels good about this project, what impact will this have in 10 years when the Lydia Apartments is now double in size, totally run down? We've got a huge loitering issue, now double the loitering and the issues that we have right now with the residents. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And next speaker. Please come to the microphone, state your name and address for the record.
Good evening, Tom DeVinck, D-E-V-I-N-C-K-E, address 220 South 6th Street, Suite 1900. I'm the attorney for Semple Mansion, a limited liability company, the owner of the Semple Mansion. My clients owned the Semple Mansion for approximately 14 years. It's not just a locally registered landmark, it's also on the National Registry. It's been meticulously and lovingly restored to every last detail, and if any one present has attended a wedding or other event at the venue, they can see just with their eyes what words really can't describe in the time we have here, but it's simply a beautiful historic property. It's also a premier wedding venue in the Twin Cities area, winning many awards. I speak specifically to B, the request for the height variance, and not just the height, but the location of the property. And as we think about the request for the height variance, I would ask that the commission keep two precepts in the back of their mind. And one is this: the National Historic Preservation Act, which is implicated by this project, although it has not been addressed by city staff. It is implicated, and it requires that the local implementing official delineate the area of potential effects for a project of this magnitude, and that hasn't been done. It hasn't been done because the applicant didn't accurately describe its project in the first instance to the State Department of Administration, which oversees the implementation of this federal statute. And this is a partly federally financed project, so the statute has application here, although it hasn't been considered. In fact, in a letter that's in the materials at pages 98 and 99, the responsible official at the State Department of Administration asks the applicant, one of the partners of the applicant, what is the APE for this project? It has never even been delineated. And so the other precept I would ask to keep in mind is how do we treat historic properties? It's axiomatic that there are two things at least that one wants to do. You want to be able to see it, and when you're there, you want to be able to see from it. Right? One thing we don't do in good planning is surround historic properties so that they're not visible. We're all mindful of some of the tragedies of the late 1800s and early 1900s in New York City, but of course, those things weren't really historic yet when they encased certain properties very closely with others. But let's take a look at what we're really dealing with here. This is the existing view from the third floor of the Semple Mansion, and I can say that the view of the skyline is a real selling point for my client. And while I would agree we're not here to just talk about private property interests, we have alternatives here where kind of everyone gets what they want. The applicant gets the size of the building they want, the shape of the building they want, but why site it in this particular way? Because this becomes the view from the Semple Mansion when this building is put into place, and you see the dramatic skyline view is completely obliterated. It's gone. Instead, you see this building. But if we move the proposed new structure west, and the parking comes to the front so that the new structure doesn't front LaSalle, but instead fronts the back alley, guess what? Same building, same dimension, same height. They get the variance that's described in B, but now look at the view from the historic property of the downtown skyline. So, of course, the building's more visible to others, and it has a view of the city at the same time. And so if we take a look at the lot itself, roughly here is where they propose to build. But here where I drew an X, the view isn't destroyed in the way I showed. And so where would we go from here? I would propose that because the federal statute hasn't been complied with, because the area of potential effects hasn't even been determined, and the state concern addressed in pages 98 and 99 of the materials in the January 4th letter, which was copied to city staff, hasn't been responded to in any meaningful way, certainly not this evening. We would ask that this hearing be continued so that my client can be, their issues can be addressed by the applicant. Also, the state's Department of Administration issues can be addressed by staff and the applicant, and then we can reconvene and see if there isn't a more responsible, better way to have this project approved. Thank you.
Thank you. And is there anyone else who would like to speak? Commissioner Sweezy, did you have a question for
Yeah,
the
I do.
speaker?
I have a question. Sir, before you go back, I have a question for you.
Sure.
I'm not familiar with the inside of the property. What's on the third floor? I mean,
The
what?
ballroom.
That's the ballroom?
Yeah.
And is that the same view that we saw from where your colleague's office is, or is that on a different floor?
I think that is the third level. That's the third level.
Is that the top level?
It is. Oh, you're on the second? Okay, she's on the second, third. I don't represent Melissa, but I know
That's
she's
okay.
attending.
I understand. But the third floor then is the top floor?
Correct.
Is there an outdoor space coming out from there that people use for photographs or anything like that?
There's no outdoor on the third level, no.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. And we can move on to some other speakers who would like to speak next. And please state your name and address for the record.
Reverend Dr. Paula Northwood. Well, can you speak to the?
Sure. Good evening. I'm Reese McPherson. I'm with MSR Architects. We're located at 710 South 2nd Street in Minneapolis, and wanted to kind of address the issues concerning kind of the view corridor. So what I'll put on the first image is kind of the view from one of the windows taken at the staircase. So what we did in here is we kind of outlined the location of our proposed addition. One of the things I noticed was in the previous document, they kind of slid the building over a little bit. Where our building is actually located, we'll be kind of covering the Hyatt building, but it's keeping the view corridor as a compromise of kind of the more premier part of downtown. So everything kind of from the IDS kind of over in the view. It's also keeping the other prominent buildings and also keeping the Van Dusen mansion also in the view of there. So it was trying to strategically kind of locate an area for the building. We also have a couple other images. So this is actually from the staircase that is on the upper level that kind of looks out. So this is actually when you're on the landing, kind of looking out. This is a view kind of before, and then this is a view kind of proposed. And you can actually see with the pillars and kind of where you are when you're actually standing on the balcony, the building is actually sitting below the lower portion of the mullions and actually hidden by a portion of the pillars that are actually in the space. So kind of two views, one kind of at the window and one kind of actually at the landing that was kind of in question. And then this is actually the view that was actually submitted in our information package, and you can kind of see, I think the other image that was submitted kind of made it look like our building was slid over and not keeping kind of the view of the IDS and kind of more of the premier buildings. So we're trying to be really sensitive about keeping the premier area of the view available for the Semple Mansion, and then addressing the preferred location from Semple on the site towards trying to move it to the other corner. We had looked at that, and if we did that, then the Van Dusen mansion then is completely shaded all the time. So we were trying to be very sensitive about where we put the building so we weren't then shading the Van Dusen outdoor wedding venue space for their space as well. So that's kind of how we were kind of looking at those two options.
Right. Thank you. Commissioner Lukey here, did you have a question?
Yeah, just
for the
one quick
speaker?
question. Approximately what would you say the distance between the stairwell and like the midpoint of the ballroom would be? Because I do not have any reference in terms of where the stairwell photo is versus.
Oh, sure. So on the ballroom encompasses all of the third floor up there. The staircase is kind of their grand staircase that kind of bisects the back of that elevation. And so
on the north elevation.
Of the north elevation. So I believe they have one or two windows that face that are more on the east end, and then you have the stairwell that comes up in the center with the arch windows, and then you have two or three more windows that are to the west.
Oh, thank you.
That are up there.
All right, and we can move on to some other speakers, and next speaker can come to the microphone.
I'm Reverend Dr. Paula Northwood, and while I reside in St. Paul, I am the acting senior minister of the Plymouth Congregational Church. That's address is 1919 LaSalle, and we are directly across the street from Lydia Apartments. And I can say that we, as a 1,700 member congregation, are very supportive of this project. And I can't really speak so much to the view, except that I can speak to the need in our neighborhood for more housing for homeless people. Almost daily, we deal with people who cross our threshold looking for help with housing. In the warmer months, we have people who sleep in our yard, sometimes as many as 15 people. And one year, we even had a person make a snow cave in the snowplow hill in our parking lot. So there is need, and we as a congregation have really worked hard at homelessness within our city and are one of the founding churches of Beacon, and we are looking forward to partnering with them to continue to work for more places for people to live. And we have had a really good experience with Lydia Apartments. Many of the residents are involved with our congregation in a variety of ways on different projects. And we have valued their relationship in our neighborhood, and we look forward to working with Beacon Interfaith Collaborative to complete this project for people who so desperately need a home. So I thank you for your support.
Great, thank you. And is there anyone else who would like to speak on this item? Anyone else? Yes. And please come to the microphone, state your name and address for the record.
My name's Catherine Lundquist, and I'm from Ward 13, and I wasn't expecting to speak about this. I came for a different reason, but I was on the board of directors for Trust in Minneapolis, which stands for Trust Renewed, Unity and Service Together. I don't believe Plymouth is a trust congregation, but I'm very familiar with the work that Beacon has done, is doing, and hopes to do in the future, because I also work a lot with homelessness and sanctuary and other issues, serving a population that is in great need, and so I'm in support of their expansion.
All right, thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? If there is no one, I will close the public hearing for this item. And Commissioners, we have a total of 4 applications before us. Commissioner Coleman.
I just have a question for staff. Before I can really evaluate the request that was stated about perhaps continuing this item, it was based on National Historic Preservation Act concerns and application information about the potential effects area, and I'm just wondering if you know anything about that.
I did talk with Sarah Beimers at the State Historic Preservation Office after receiving the letter from them. Because there are federal funds involved, they do need to go through the Section 106 process with them as part of the environmental assessment that will be done for the project because of those federal funds. We had a discussion about whether or not the city's HPC would get involved in reviewing this project, and the answer to that is no, because Lydia House itself is not a historic property, and so the HPC does not get involved on a project when its neighbors are the historically designated properties. So for the financing part of that is what the SHPO will engage in with the applicant and go through that Section 106 process as part of the funding portion of the project. Depending on the outcome of that review, they could have conditions on it that may bring it back to this body, depending on what the outcome of that review is. However, I would not continue this to wait for that process, because that process can take some time. And I would let the applicant speak to this or answer the question specifically about a continuance or not. It seems that it would be better served to let the process run its course on the financing end and see what the outcome of that is. They could conclude that the area of potential effect does include those 2 properties. I will assume that it will, but that the project itself will have no impacts on those 2 properties, given its placement, given the work that has gone into cite the addition on the property. Because when I first met with the applicants, the property was in a different location, and I think there was a greater impact to those 2 historic properties. But after working through that and speaking with the neighbors, which we encouraged them to go and do, and they did, the project is then before you tonight. But I would not recommend a continuance based on a federal financing process that needs to go through the State Historic Preservation Office at this time. But I would say that if there are conditions, and the applicant will be well aware of those, if there are conditions that changes the design, they will be coming back. So, and they maybe have had conversations with the SHPO after I did, because I think I received the letter first because I believe the applicant was out of town that day.
Right.
So maybe we can let them speak to it too.
All right. And maybe we could have the applicant just address that as long as we're on that topic.
Good evening. I'm Chris Detling with Beacon Interfaith. My address is 4948 Russell Avenue South in Minneapolis. Just want to clarify that the State Historic Preservation, the letter that was in the application, that was generated by our financing partner, Minnesota Housing, when they go through this process. So they define that area of impact, and they were the ones that the neighbor or the Semple attorney is saying defined it incorrectly, not us. So I just wanted to be clear that it was the State Housing Finance Agency that started that process. So they take the lead on it. We answer questions. We provide information. So we do this on every project that has federal financing. We'll continue to participate with that. We haven't had conversations with SHPO directly. The first time we found out that the environmental review had started was when the letter was sent to Hillary and she forwarded it on to us. So we'll go through that process in due time. We just don't typically do it before Planning Commission.
Right. Thank you. And any questions of the speaker? If there are none, we can go back to considering a motion. Are there any further questions? Commissioner Cogill, to you? Okay, nothing. Are there any further questions, or would someone like to make a motion? We have a total of 4 applications, starting with a conditional use permit for the expansion of a supportive housing facility.
I'll move
Commissioner Cogill.
I will move that we approve the amendment to the conditional use permit to expand the existing 40-bed supportive housing use by an additional 40 units with the one stated condition. Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve item A, the conditional use permit, or actually amendment to conditional use permit to expand the supportive housing use. Is there any discussion? Commissioner Cogan.
Just briefly say I live like a half a block from here. The need is great. It is kind of a paramount concern, I think, of the city right now, paramount beyond a lot of the other concerns discussed tonight, especially, our views of the IDS Center. So I'm really excited to be supportive of this, and I urge my fellow commissioners to consider supporting it as well.
All right, thank you. Any further discussion? Commissioner Cron.
Just to say for the record, I'm very familiar with the Section 106 process, and they may have design changes as a mitigation for this, and if those rise to the level that this will be back in front of us, should those changes be required. So I'm comfortable moving this forward at this time.
All right. And if there is no further discussion, we have a motion and a second. Clerk, please call the roll.
Coleman? Aye. Cogill?
Aye.
Ellison?
Aye.
Kranzer?
Aye.
Lipke Pier?
Aye.
Magrino?
Aye.
Rockwell?
Aye.
Schrader?
Aye.
Sweezy?
Aye.
9-0.
And that motion carries. Moving along, we have 3 more applications related to this item. Commissioner Cogill.
I'll move to approve the conditional use permit to increase the maximum permitted height of the building from 4 stories, 56 feet, to 6 stories, 67 feet, with the one stated condition.
Right, and we have a motion to approve item B, the conditional use permit for building height. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Coleman.
Aye.
Colgill.
Aye.
Ellison.
Aye.
Cronzer.
Aye.
Deputy Peer.
Aye.
Greeno.
Aye.
Rockwell.
Aye.
Schrader.
Aye.
Sweezy.
Aye.
9-0.
And that motion carries. Next item C and D, Commissioner Cogill.
If I can do that at the same time?
You can.
I will do that. The variance and the site plan review with the 7 stated conditions. Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to approve items C and D, variance and site plan review with 7 stated conditions. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Coleman.
Aye.
Colgill.
Aye.
Ellison.
Aye.
Cronzer.
Aye.
Deputy Peer.
Aye.
Greeno.
Aye.
Rockwell.
Aye.
Schrader. Sweezy.
Aye.
9-0.
And that motion carries. That concludes our discussion on item 10. Our next item for discussion is item 11901 Winter Street Northeast. Staff is Ms. Smith.
Good evening, President Brown. The application before you is at 901 Winter Street Northeast, and the project tonight includes 4 applications. So the first one is rezoning the property from R2B to the R4 district, a variance to reduce the minimum front yard requirement to allow for a ground floor patio, a variance to reduce the minimum lot area requirement in the R4 district from 1,085 square feet to 1,031 square feet per dwelling unit, and that translates to an increase in dwelling units allowed on the site from 19 to 20, and then also a site plan review for a new multiple family building with 20 dwelling units. So the existing property contains an industrial site that was constructed in 1951 and was most recently used for Minnesota metal finishing plant. The property has frontage on both Fillmore and Northeast Winter Street. The surrounding properties are primarily single-family homes and duplexes in the R1A and R2B districts. There are also various other zoning districts in the greater area, including R4, R5, I1, and I2. The street grid in this area is irregular due to the decommissioned railroad tracks, 1 block to the west and southwest of the site. And also Interstate 35W is 3 blocks to the east. And so there's several dead-end streets in this area, but Hennepin Avenue East is a community corridor that's just about 1 block to the south. You can see the dead-end streets from this area a little bit better. And then here's some photos provided by the applicant of the existing industrial building. So the proposal is for a 3-story building with 20 dwelling units and a surface parking area. 8 of the surface parking spaces would be covered in part by the building. So those are the westernmost spots, and then the easternmost spots would be mostly covered by a wooden trellis carport structure. They have consolidated curb cuts. They're going to have 1 curb cut off of Winter Street Northeast, and the Fillmore frontage would have some walk-up units as well as the main. That doesn't have the main entrance. The main entrance to the lobby area is off of the south on Winter Street. Here's the floor plan that shows you how the building would cover over some of the parking spaces. And then there's some elevations. The applicant is proposing a mixture of fiber cement panel, the 5/16 inch stucco panel finish, as well as LP smart siding. And in the staff report, I failed to point out this is actually not fiber cement. It's considered a wood composite material, which wouldn't normally be allowed on multifamily buildings. So 0% would be the max for a multiple family building for that material. And then they're also requesting alternative compliance to exceed 30% of the fiber cement panel material on all elevations. There's also a blank wall. So on the north side of the property, there's a blank wall, 41 feet long on the second and third floors, and that's adjacent to an interior side lot line. And here's a picture of the material boards. So staff is recommending denial of all 4 applications, and this is primarily tied to the rezoning request from R2B to R4. The existing R2B zoning district accommodates properties within the with single and 2-family dwellings. The R4 district is considered a multiple family district. The site is not near designated nodes, corridors, or land use features that would support increased density in this location. The majority of the properties within a 350-foot radius contain single-family homes. Out of the 71 properties that are not vacant, 73% contain single-family homes, 24% contain duplexes, and 2 contain industrial uses, including the subject property. Therefore, the proposed rezoning would not be compatible with the context of this area. I'll note that the site was reclassified from the M1 light manufacturing district in 1999 down to the R2B district, and there have been no significant changes in the area since that time. There are some conditions of approval that we've prepared if you wanted to consider an approval, and those can be distributed as you wish. Those would address some of the landscaping deficiencies in the site plan review, and also exterior materials and blank walls, among some other things. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, and commissioners, are there any questions of staff? Hearing none, I'll open the public hearing for this item. I'd like to ask the applicant to speak first, so please come to the microphone, state your name and address for the record.
Commissioners, my name is William Wells. I am the project architect and applicant for this. My address is 2838 Fremont Avenue South in Minneapolis. I'm here tonight with the property owner and our environmental consultants. We respectfully disagree with zoning staff's recommendation for you tonight. We feel that there's some critical information that's missing that we would like to add tonight to add some clarification. We did meet with the Beltrami Neighborhood Association 4 times before coming to this board tonight. They did recommend approval of the project, and then additional neighbors wrote letters of support for this project. Essentially, the project is removing a warehouse building that's heavily polluted and building a new project that is 20% affordable housing. This project right now, that is an aerial photo on the screen of the site. The site is located right here. You can see that the warehouse does go all the way up to the lot lines. There's very little green space on the site right now. After meeting with the Neighborhood Association neighbors 4 times, they told us that the livability issues coming from that building are very, very serious. And that's part of the reason that we need to demolish that building and put a residential use on the site. This is Hennepin Avenue down here. Our site is 1 block off of Hennepin Avenue. Here, there is a mix of other types of uses in the neighborhood. We would take issue with zoning staff statement on page 3 of the staff report, where they write there are reasonable uses allowed under the existing R2B classification, including the legal use of the structure as a single family home or duplex. We can't use that structure as a single family home, and we don't think it's reasonable on a 21,000 square foot lot, 1 block off of Hennepin Avenue, to be a single family house. There is about $1 million of cost to buy the lot and clean up the pollution on the site. There is no way to build a single family house on that site. This is a map of the zoning in the neighborhood as it exists right now. Currently, our site is right here. As you can see, the land use pattern of the zoning is we have blocks, and then we have R5 at the corner. We have a block next to us that's R2B, and then we have a new multifamily housing development that was approved by the city about 6 months ago. Across the street from us, that's 42 beds. To the block north of us, you can see it's R1, and then at the corner there's R4. Next block, R5 at the corner, and that pattern happens through the neighborhood. So we don't think that we're necessarily proposing anything that's out of the ordinary of what's already happening within this neighborhood. We'd also like to point out, this is an image of future zoning in the Minneapolis 2040 comp plan. This is our site. Can you zoom in on that, please? This is our site, right? That's our site right there. The orange dot, which would be corridor 4. Corridor 4 is described as residential buildings of 1 to 4 stories. That is what we are proposing. That is in line with the Minneapolis 2040 comp plan. We are proposing a 3-story building. So while it might not fit in with the 1999 plan, it does fit in with future land use policy. I'd like to talk specifically about the variances on the project. We are requesting a setback variance at the front of the lot here. Most of the units in this building are 3-bedroom units. This is family-friendly, affordable housing. We want to build these patios at these ground floor units because we think that it will encourage a more residential use, look better on the street, and support families better to have this fence, landscaping, and patios, ground floor patios, rather than just sort of a blank front yard of sod. The staff report doesn't mention this, but there are also balconies on the front of the building that would project into that setback. So that would have to be part of the variance as well, would be for the patios and the balconies. I'd like to point out that the building complies with the setbacks on all sides. So this isn't about the building, this is just about landscaping elements within the front yard. The second variance that we're asking for is to reduce the minimum lot area. So an R4 zoning would allow 1,250 square feet per unit. On a 20,600 square foot lot, that would allow 16 units. We are adding 4 additional affordable housing units to the project to make the project 20% affordable. When you do that, you can go up to 19 units. So we're only requesting a variance for 1 unit. That unit is an affordable housing unit. So if you didn't approve the variance, we would just take that affordable unit off the project. It wouldn't affect the building bulk at all, but we feel that removing the affordable housing unit isn't in the city's best interest. As far as the exterior building materials, we met with the neighborhood group multiple times and went through multiple options. The design you see in front of you tonight is what the neighbors wanted. They wanted a building with a lot of horizontal siding. They felt that that would fit in contextually with the other structures in the neighborhood. We did look at other designs. We looked at a building that was more historic with a lot of brick. They said, no, we want something that's very modern and new. So we tried to give that to them. We understand that staff has concerns about the north side of the building. That would be right here on the north side of the building. There is a house here right to the north, and then this young woman that lives here in her backyard, she came to the neighborhood meetings. She did not want a lot of windows or balconies facing her house or her backyard. So I purposefully did not put windows on the north facade for that reason, to consider the neighbor. If the planning commission wants to change that, of course, we'd be open to it. But I had to bring this to you tonight after the neighborhood meetings with their input. I don't have any more statements tonight. I would like the environmental consultant to speak, maybe before we go into the architectural questions. I think what they have to say is very serious, and we need to hear that. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And next speaker, please come to the microphone, state your name and address for the record.
Good evening. My name is John Findlay. I'm the president and CEO of the Javelin Group. We're the environmental consultant on the property, and our office is at 10125 Crosstown Circle, Suite 107 in Eden Prairie. Basically, I wanted to give a little background on the property. This is what it looks like currently. It's the The history of this property was initially built in 1951, and it was occupied by a Bond Tool and Die company and another tool and die company. There was a couple additions added onto the building over the years, and those types of companies often use a lot of organic solvents. They deal a lot with metals and petroleum products, and from our experience in investigating many of these kinds of properties in the past, they have a lot of that kind of contamination in soil and groundwater from especially properties that were being used for this use in the 50s and 60s and 70s prior to environmental regulations being in effect. The Minnesota Metal Finishing Company that is currently closing and being decommissioned has been there since about the 1980s. They're a metal plating company, heavy use of organic solvents, chlorinated solvents, metals, arsenic, cyanide, lead, chromium are often used at this facility. And they use a lot of acids and bases as part of their process in these large vats that are on the facility. And that type of chemical use oftentimes causes corrosions of floor drains. Typically, contaminants would go through a treatment process, go through a floor drain and into the sewer system of the city of Minneapolis. Oftentimes, because of the acids used, the floor drains get corroded and the chemicals directly go below the building or some other source on the way out to the street and cause contamination on properties like this. And there has been documented contamination. We haven't completed all our studies on this property yet. Another interior view of the vat, you can see how the floors are contaminated. One of the things that will have to be done as part of the decommissioning with Hennepin County is to determine how to handle the floors and the concrete in the building cannot be recycled because of the contamination. We'll have to take core samples of the floors and walls and ceilings in the facility and determine the degree of contamination, how that flooring can be handled. If it's considered hazardous waste, it'd have to be shipped out of state to a hazardous waste landfill. Otherwise, all of the concrete it will be contaminated from our experience and will have to go to a landfill instead of being recycled because of the contamination. The one thing that has been done in one of the additions that happened in the 70s there, they did a geotechnical investigation. We reviewed that report, and there's at least 5 feet of contaminated fill on the property that was brought in sometime during the past, contaminated with coal ash. Coal ash often has heavy metals such as arsenic, lead, chromium in it, and mercury. And that material usually isn't geotechnically suitable for a lot of buildings, and also the MPCA requires in their regulations for properties that are residential that they have to have 4 feet of clean soil. So if there's contaminated soil on the property that exceeds the residential standards, which much of the soil would, then it has to be excavated and landfilled, and then clean fill brought in all green spaces of the property. And then in impervious areas where there's asphalt paving or building, you have to have 2 feet of clean fill between the impervious surface and the contaminated soil. That would cause significant cost in excavating all the soil and taking it to a landfill and all the testing and that's required. Currently, there's been Superfund action at the site. An emergency response from the MPCA Superfund program has been there for the last month at least. They have been busy pumping out all of the liquids from the vats and drums that are in the building. They have pumped out thousands of gallons and taken it and have it be disposed of properly because they are concerned because the site was being closed and the inability of the current owner to pay for disposal of all this material. This emergency response has been occurring. They only removed all pumpable liquids. All the sludges still remain inside the vats, inside the barrels. There's also a couple of waste treatment pits in the facility that have sludge in them, as well as floor drains will have to be videotaped and any sludge net pumped out to see if the floor drains are, the integrity is there, and all the testing involved in determining how much contamination remains on the property. There's also significant potential for a vapor intrusion risk to the property and nearby properties. In late 2016, the MPCA promulgated new regulations for potential vapor intrusion that can come from solvents and petroleum products as they evaporate below buildings. They can pool under buildings and then find their way into buildings, much like radon does, and cause potential issues inside buildings. And so that will also have to be evaluated, and if they exceed regulatory criteria, any new structure would require to have a vapor mitigation built into the design of the system. So we need to continue the investigation on the property. We've applied for funding from DEED. They have a program in place for a decommissioned property like this that's being converted into housing with a low-income housing component, specifically for this kind of property, to get blighted properties back onto the rolls and get them cleaned up. And we've applied for over $200,000 to deal with just the building component contamination. In addition, we'll be applying for DEED and Hennepin County ERF and Met Council funds for dealing with soil and groundwater and soil vapor contamination and investigation costs, which could easily exceed over $200,000 for dealing with this site. The proposed use as this multifamily housing, I think, is a way that there's a lot of funding available for this type of cleanup, for these types of projects that will help get this property cleaned up and back on the rolls of taxing, and I think going forward, if it was to remain as a single-family option only, the property that we see here probably could sit here for some time, and the cleanup would be delayed significantly from this proposed development. Also, I think the use of this property, since there will be parking areas that will be covering up direct contact to contaminated soil, and also the cleanup that will occur on the property will help this property get cleaned up and back to a good use.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
And commissioners, are there any questions for the applicant? Commissioner Lukey-Peer.
I have a question for the architect. So just a few quick questions. One is, how big are these patios?
The patios, it does say in the staff report the exact.
Just approximately, like, I'm looking at dimensions, it's hard to read on my handout.
It would be approximately 10 by 10.
Okay. And then the balconies above them, are they?
It would project out approximately 4 feet.
Okay. And then what's happening at the northeast corner of the site? Is it just grass, or what is that?
This area? Mm-hmm. Oh, there's a dog park right area, because we don't want, that's where the pet waste is going to be, so there's like a little dog park.
It seems
area.
kind of small. Is it the whole corner there, or is it just that itty bitty corner, like smaller than a parking space?
It's that corner right there, because that's the maximum allowable area.
Really? And what's happening next to it in that green thing of nothing?
That would just be a space for residents.
Okay. And then it looks like there might be a fence or something between the compact stalls and the other stalls, or is it a fence, or what is that?
Right here?
Yeah.
So there's a fence right there, and then there's a sliding gate right here. So this whole area is fenced.
And what kind of fence is it?
It's a wood composite fence.
How tall?
The maximum height allowed is 6 feet.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Right. Any further questions of the applicant? If there are none, we can move on to some other speakers. And how many of you would like to speak on this item? So a few of you. So you can decide who goes first and come to the microphone and state your name and address for the record.
Hello, Commissioners. My name is Mike Farron. I live at 4820 35th Avenue South. And I am the neighborhood coordinator with the Beltrami Neighborhood Council, and I'm here to provide some context on where the BNC stands and our history with William and Eric. So they approached us in August regarding this project, and we held a community meeting on August 27th, where they originally brought the plans for the apartment building. Needless to say, there were several skeptical residents with concerns. We shared all of that with them. They kind of reformulated the plan, came back to us next month, held another community meeting on September 24th, and at which point they had made several changes to the proposal as a result of the feedback provided by the community. For example, it was a 4-story building originally. We said that's too big. They changed it to a 3-story building. They added some of the security components like the sliding gate for the parking, which was discussed in addition to the fence. Neighbors were concerned with the security aspects of it, as well as the green space. They provided green space. And they also met with Councilmember Fletcher and his staff, as well as city staff, and incorporated the affordable housing component, which as a neighborhood we appreciated as well. So they met with us a third time on October 1st, and at which point that's when it was brought to the board of directors whether or not we would write a letter of support for the project. It's part of the public record. We did, in fact, write a letter of support dated October 4th, and it was unanimously approved by the board of directors, and this specifically supported the demolition of the current building, rezoning of the site from R2B to R4, and construction of a 3-story, 20-unit apartment building. A couple more months went by. They came back and we held a 4th community meeting on November 26th, and that's when they brought us the specific variances that they were looking for that you have in front of you, as well as the site plan review, and then once again the rezoning efforts. We held discussion, board of directors as well as community members, and once again we unanimously decided to write a letter of support in favor of the project. So they've been tremendously receptive to the community members, to the board, and to staff, and we feel that this project would be a great fit to the neighborhood. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, next speaker can come to the microphone and state your name and address.
Hi, my name's Amber Mike. I live at 400 Pierce Street. My house is this building. My backyard is this building. My fence ends and the building begins. I can touch it. My cats go up to it and sit in the window. My raspberries touch it. My compost is next to it. I spend time gardening with the sludge that they squeegee off into my backyard. I also was initially one of the residents that was very skeptical of this, William and Eric. They did sit with us 4 times and they heard all of our concerns, many of which were mine and my husband's, wondering what developer this is. Is it going to be another big, huge development in Northeast? Is it going to change the neighborhood? We have, I believe, about 5 3-story apartment buildings in our neighborhood. If you've ever driven through Beltrami, it's small, but it is a mismatch of houses. There's some from the 80s, there's some from really early on when Minneapolis was getting started. And there's apartments. And when they even made the idea to change from 4 stories to 3, we thought, okay, we could maybe work with them. And they considered requests regarding a fence, and they considered our request making more security around it. I came today just to say that I am in favor of it. I do have some concerns, but every time that I voiced them, I felt like they've worked and they've listened to me as somebody in the neighborhood, as a council member on the BNC, and I do believe that moving forward they would work with me. My fear is that another developer could come in the future, or at this point if they were denied, and they could maybe not work with us or not care. And the fact that they have means a lot to us. I also urge you to consider the photos, environmentally speaking. This is my backyard, and please consider that if I ever raise children here or if it is just me. That was my choice to move there, but I can't know what was in that building until now that it's been exposed. And I just urge you to consider that at this point and know that I stand as a resident of that neighborhood in favor of it, given that they're willing to do site cleanup and work with us as a neighborhood and a neighbor. So thank you.
All right, thank you. And is there anyone else who would like to speak? Please state your name and address for the record.
Hi, I'm Justin Cameron. I'm her husband. This place is really disgusting, and I didn't even know how bad it was till I just saw those photos. I would like to raise kids in this city. I believe in this city, but I can't with that. Knowing that how disgusting that place was, I'd have to move. So this is our best chance to clean this up. People complain maybe about parking or landscaping, and that's not my concern. I'm concerned about the vapors now. So if I have to trade off a few more neighbors to our great neighborhood of Beltrami for this place to get cleaned up. I mean, that's a win-win, I think. That's good for me. And that's all I'll say. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And next speaker, please state your name and address for the record.
Hi, I am Jacqueline Benjamin. I live at 334 Lincoln Street Northeast. I am chairperson of the Beltrami Neighborhood Council. So as previously stated, the developers spent a lot of time working with our neighborhood, listening to our concerns, making changes accordingly. As I've been sitting here today, I'm also very concerned about the site as is. If this were to be denied, we don't know how long this building could sit here in this state with who knows what leaking into the groundwater. The proposal to put single-family housing on here with right across the street where some other multifamily housing is being built, that is at least $500,000 worth of cleanup. So, and that is without the demolition of anything. So the demolition plus whatever the cleanup is, nobody's going to make their money back with single-family housing. Therefore, I don't think anyone's going to want to build on here without additional funding coming from who knows where. So I'm seeing this as a win-win for the neighborhood. More neighbors, less blight, and more fun. Thank you.
Thank you. And is there anyone else who would like to speak on this item? Anyone else? And yes.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Eric Oldestead with Value Homes LLC. I live at 4716 123rd Lane, Northeast Blaine, Minnesota. And I am a local property owner, have a history of successful projects in Northeast and Beltrami neighborhood. It started with 437 Fillmore Street, which is right by this property. And then I met the seller of the property that we're talking about, and he sold me what used to be used as a parking lot, but he had a lot of issues with the city on, is it legally a parking lot? You got to do lights, this and that. So I bought that property, that lot, and turned it from a not a good parking lot into a beautiful single-family home, and that was doable. It would cost $41,000 for the lot. Well, as things, I met Jack. His name is Jack, and he talked about his building here and there, and we became, we would chat when I was in the area, and eventually it turned into this project, and he's obviously no longer in the business of the metal finishing, and apparently that is a very big problem in all of Hennepin County. I don't think anybody is, these are his words, that no one's going to be doing metal finishing in Hennepin County anytime soon because of all the pollution and whatnot. The response to the staff report. Page 3 of the staff report says there are reasonable uses allowed under the existing R2B two-family district zoning classification, including the legal use of the structure as a single-family home or duplex. As they had already mentioned, it'll be at least $1 million just to buy the land, demo the building, along with all the environmental work. So there's absolutely no way to make it work with a single family home or with a duplex or with a triplex or with 3 triplexes. It's just impossible. You cannot buy this property and develop it and not do at least 20 units, in my opinion, as far as making it where you're not going to lose money and eventually have some old, horrible situation going on. Because obviously, we can't do it without at least breaking even, right? Another, the purpose of the project is, these guys are great. When I built those other homes, I would take my kids to the park right there. It's right, just north of there. That's like a block away. There's this awesome, huge park, and I got 2 little boys, and we'd go, play in the park. And I just really fell in love with the neighborhood. And then meeting the neighbors and the neighborhood group, they're great. And this is our project. This is everybody together, and this is what we came up with. Because initially, for me, talking with William, it was like, well, how many units can we get? Let's do the numbers here, and okay, 4 levels and this and that, and that totally changed into what it is today, and which is the best situation for the residents, for the neighborhood, and just a mix of everybody's input, and this is where we're at. Talking with even the planning committee in Minneapolis, there was always talk of, this is a dangerous situation. Have you been speaking with the current owner? This is because there could be an explosion, or so. It is a dangerous situation what's going on there right now, and I think this is a great win-win for everybody, and I just really hope that you guys will approve it. I ask for your support and approval, and that's all I've got for you. Thank you so much for your time. It's been a long one tonight, I think, and I appreciate it.
All right, thank you. And is there anyone else who would like to speak? Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing. And commissioners, we have several applications, total of 3 4 for this item. Are there any questions, or would someone like to start things off with a motion? Commissioner Coleman.
I just have to say that I love the Beltrami Neighborhood Association. The last time I heard from you was with the application across the street from this application. And I have told several people the story of just the breath of fresh air that you brought to welcoming people to your neighborhood and working with developers. So I just wanted to say thank you for that.
Right. Any further questions, or would someone like to make a motion? Commissioner Lupke here.
Yes, I'm going to move to actually approve the rezoning application. I'm kind of surprised. Normally, I think staff, you have a really amazing staff person assigned to you, so I'm actually finding myself surprised that I'm opposing the recommendation. But I think that the amendment to the zoning is consistent with the upcoming comp plan. I think that it just makes sense, especially seeing the map. Your architect did a good job showing context in terms of what the neighborhood is and the various R5 dots that are across there. And I don't think it's inconsistent where it is. I also think that it's in the public's interest, given the contamination cleanup that needs to occur and the ability to do so otherwise, which kind of leads me to also, I think that there are not reasonable uses of the property under the existing zoning just simply because of the cost of cleanup. So I think that those are the findings I would use to support a rezoning to that.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner Lupke. So we have a motion to approve item A, the rezoning. I should point out, since the new 2040 comp plan isn't quite in effect yet, we should try to focus our findings on the current comp plan. So I might add, just in terms of finding number 1, the consistency of the proposal with the policies of the comprehensive plan. The property is located just a block off of East Hennepin Avenue, which is a community corridor. So given that proximity, I think R4 zoning is appropriate here. Commissioner Lupke here outlined nicely the public interest component, finding number 2 related to the environmental cleanup, and also whether finding number 3, whether existing uses of the property are compatible with the proposed zoning classification, whether let me read that to make sure I'm characterizing that correctly. That has to do with the compatibility of the proposed zoning classification. In this neighborhood, there are a variety of different building types, housing types, zoning classifications. There is higher R zoning within a block of here. Also, as Commissioner Lupke here pointed out, there's an industrial building currently on the site, which really would make it difficult to reuse for permitted uses under the current R2B zoning district. So before we go too much farther along, is there a second for that motion? We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion on that? Hearing none, we have a motion and a second to approve item A, the rezoning. Clerk, please call the roll.
Coleman.
Aye.
Colville.
Aye.
Ellison.
Aye.
Cronzer.
Aye.
Lipke-Pier.
Aye.
Magrino.
Aye.
Rockwell.
Aye.
Schrader.
Aye.
Sweezy.
Aye.
9-0.
And that motion carries. Also, I know before we consider the other applications, Mei-Ling, you had mentioned that maybe you had some suggested motion language or conditions that might be added if we were to approve some of the other applications.
Hi, President Brown. I don't have any recommended conditions for item B, the front yard setback variance, and I'd also like to clarify the balconies that are in the required yards do not meet the threshold for an obstruction, so they're actually permitted obstructions based on their size and their projection area, so you wouldn't need to amend the action based on that. For item C, the variance to reduce the minimum lot area, we are recommending a condition that a deed restriction, restrictive covenant, or equivalent mechanism be filed to ensure the longevity of the affordable units to ensure they qualify for the floor area density bonus. So that density bonus is critical for them to get to the 19 units allowed per acre instead of 16, per the lot area instead of 16. So that's why it's necessary.
All right. And Commissioner Rockwell, do you have a question?
So, Commissioners, I had in my packet, at least, I think we have the suggested conditions, including the one that Mei-Ling just outlined for us in our folders.
Yeah. I won't go through the rest of the site plan review conditions.
You can, but I think you gave us a copy of them.
All right. So moving along to items B, C, and D. Would someone like to make a motion on any of those items? Commissioner Lupke-Peter.
Actually, before I make a motion, I do have a question for the architect in relation to that item. Variance B, the front yard setback requirement. So from what I'm hearing from staff is this has to do with the ground level patios you have.
Yes.
And I was just curious why there are three but not a fourth one for the corner unit, just, I mean, if it's an important amenity.
The reason...
On Fillmore, sorry, I should, on the same trajectory or on the same line.
That's a very good point. That the corner unit is designed a little bit differently than all the other units. The characteristics of the street are different. Mostly I didn't do it because the corner unit is just a completely different design than the other units.
Yeah, it looked larger, like it was it was hard to see here, but it's a larger unit, multiple bedroom. Seemed like it might be more actually more need for outdoor patio than maybe some other. I don't know if we're getting close to your impervious surface.
I think if we did the patio, we'd put it right here.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a bedroom right there, so...
You wouldn't do it in that gap between those shrubs where there's like a tiny, just north of that tree? Right, right, going north.
I think it would have to be right here.
Anyway, I'm just curious, because I think that outdoor spaces are an extension of living spaces, and I think that since it's a residential setting, it helps kind of break down the scale in terms of providing some... so provided that it's screened appropriately, some privacy, but some sense of neighborhood connection. So I find that actually really incredibly consistent with what we try to do in our city. So, but I just kind of want to make sure that it's, why is it only for those and not for the one that actually has multiple bedrooms where you might want to...
I think I was trying to do a couple different things. I was trying to put more landscaping on that corner rather than just a big concrete patio. I wanted to really emphasize the landscaping.
Okay, and would you be willing to entertain additional landscaping around the patios just to screen it a little bit from the sidewalk so it isn't so right up against the sidewalk feeling in terms of perception, like some shrubs?
Yes.
Okay, so then I would like to make a motion to approve the variance to reduce the minimum front yard requirement with the conditions as proposed by, I guess there isn't a condition on that one for Mei-Ling, but I would like to add a condition that the patios be screened on all sides with shrubs for privacy. And the exploration of a possible fourth patio if possible, but if not, it works with staff. And I believe it is using the property in a reasonable manner, especially given the neighborhood residential context, as well as that it won't alter the essential character of the locality, and in fact will actually make it more consistent with other homes on the block.
May I ask a clarifying question, please?
Yes.
In the site plan review suggested conditions, there's a specific condition related to limiting the height of the shrubs that are in the required front yard, particularly those next to windows and along the ground floor. So if you could specify the height that you're looking for the shrubbery or screening, I think that would be helpful.
I would think 30 to 40 inches, something in that ballpark where you can see over comfortably, but you get a sense of some separation, some prospect and refuge kind of thing going on. So,
thank you.
All right, so we have a motion and a second to approve item B, the front setback variance with a condition related to patio screening. So a motion and a second. Any discussion on that? No discussion. So we have, again, a motion and a second to approve item B, the front yard setback variance. Clerk, please call the roll.
Coleman.
Aye.
Cogill.
Aye.
Ellison.
Aye.
Kronzer.
Aye.
Lipke Pier.
Aye.
Magrino.
Aye.
Rockwell.
Aye.
Schrader.
Aye.
Sweezy.
Aye.
9-0.
That motion carries. Commissioner Lupke Pier.
sure. I'm going to move approval of variance C to reduce the minimum lot area per dwelling unit, including the condition that Mei Ling provided regarding the deed restriction as written. I think that it, in terms of findings, the applicant is proposing to use property in a reasonable manner that's keeping with the spirit and intent of the ordinance and comp plan, especially given our goals toward affordable housing. And given the really strong neighborhood support for this, I think that it speaks to its ability to actually blend in with the neighborhood context. And also, I just want to say at this opportunity that I think this goes to show what good, authentic engagement with a community and neighborhood group can result in when it comes to projects like this that might not otherwise be viewed as successfully as this one.
All right, thank you. Any further? So we have a motion. Do we have a second on that? We have a motion and a second to approve item C, the variance for minimum lot area with the one stated condition. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Coleman.
Aye.
Cogill.
Aye.
Ellison.
Aye.
Kronzer.
Aye.
Lipke Pier.
Aye.
Magrino.
Aye.
Rockwell.
Aye.
Schrader.
Aye.
Sweezy.
Aye.
9-0.
That motion carries. Moving along to item D, the site plan review. Commissioner Lupke Pier. I might point out too on that one, the first condition, maybe we'd want to change that date to February of 2020.
That's a good idea, unless you want to do some
I don't
landscaping
know that they
this
can
month.
finish the landscaping in a month, so.
Should we ask
Two years, excuse me, so 2021, yeah.
All right, well, I will move approval of site plan review, including the 8 stated conditions provided by staff. And I will say, actually, including condition 3 regarding the blank wall provision. I am a blank wall stickler, as we heard earlier tonight, so I think you need to find some way to incorporate some interest into that north facade. So that's my motion.
All right, and so we have a motion to approve item D, the site plan review, noting typo correction and condition 1, changing 2019 to 2021. Is there a second? We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Coleman.
Aye.
Cogill.
Aye.
Ellison.
Aye.
Kronzer.
Aye.
Lipke Pier.
Aye.
Magrino.
Aye.
Rockwell.
Aye.
Schrader.
Aye.
Sweezy.
Aye.
9-0.
And that motion carries. That concludes our discussion on item 11. Our final item for consideration tonight is item 12, 102 through 128 North First Street. Staff is Mr. Hanauer, and I believe maybe the person who wanted to speak on this has left, so should just double check if there's anyone else who wanted to speak on item 12. And if there is no one here, we can have really a very brief overview, I think. Just really short.
The Archive Apartment Mixed-Use Development has the 5 applications. Conditioning is permit for to increase the height of the building, a variance for loading spaces.
Oh, come on!
Architecture director.
There we go.
A variance of the sign standards and
That was awesome.
then site plan review. Staff's recommended approval of the 5 applications, and I did talk to those that did have some questions about the project, and along with the developer, and those concerns I think have been alleviated.
Okay. Sounds good. Are there any questions for staff on this one? If not, I will very briefly open the public hearing just to make sure there's no one else who'd like to speak on this item. And if not, I will close the public hearing. Commissioners, we have 5 applications. Would someone like to make a motion on those? Yeah, perhaps all at once. Commissioner Magrino.
I will make a motion to adopt staff findings and approve items A, B, C, D, and E.
We have a motion and a second to approve items A, B, C, D, and E. Is there any discussion? Commissioner Magrino.
I'll say, since we're talking about it, this is actually a pretty cool project. It did improve a lot between committee of the whole now. Thanks for getting rid of the weird Illuminati symbols that were all along the base. And I think it's really interesting what you did with all the ground floor units in the retail space. And it looks good.
All right, thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Coleman.
Aye.
Coghill.
Aye.
Kranzer.
Aye.
Lipke-Pier.
Aye.
Magrino.
Aye.
Buckwell.
Aye.
Schrader.
Aye.
Easy.
Aye.
8-0.
That motion carries. That concludes our discussion on item 12. Also concludes our business for today. We have no committee of the whole this Thursday. Our next meeting is January 28th, and we are adjourned.